All right, welcome everyone to today's Resource YYC Lunch and Learn. Today we have Paul who will be presenting on, and so you have an idea, now what? And if you don't know, Resource YYC is a co-working community for professionals. We have private office spaces, dedicated desks, virtual office options, and drop-in boardroom and desk availability. So come on down if you ever need a space. All right, over to you, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Rosemary. Yeah, my name is Paul Buller, and my background, a little bit of my story is I graduated from University of Calgary with mechanical engineering degree back in '98. I spent about roughly the first 15 years of my career working in at a consulting engineering firm, doing different kinds of analysis and number crunching, which really scratched an itch. But then about a decade ago, roughly, I decided to make the leap over into the entrepreneurial world, which is a scary world, but also additionally scary because my leap over was related to a hardware product that I was bringing to market. And you know, those of you who've been down the road of a hardware product, I know Ron Bettine has. It's a challenging road to go down, and I learned a lot along the way. The first one I was working on was called the RazerLift, and so I developed that from about 2013. Well, even earlier than that, but sort of started the company around 2013, 2014. Stepped aside late 2021, kind of brought the company as far as I was going to, and then as a good team there to take the next steps. I've been working since then on a couple of other of my own ideas, bringing them to market, one of which I'll talk about a little bit today, because it's good, I think, useful for illustration purposes, but also helping other people on their product ideas and helping them bring them to market. So that's a little about me. After the talk, if you've got other specific questions or ideas or want to connect for other stuff, Rosemary's got my contact info, so you can reach out to her and we can get in touch that way. So what I'm going to talk about today basically is kind of at a high level, if you've got a physical hardware type product, what are some of the key things that you need to know and need to think about as you try to take it to market? Now, I was thinking about some of the stuff I'm going to talk about is actually any new company ideas. There's going to be some just general advice there, but some of it is very much specific to developing hardware products in general. So the first question that I would have, and just to confirm, now I'm not as familiar with Zoom, so it did just change to the other slide there, the what's your goal? Okay, perfect. Technology doesn't always work properly for me. So what's your goal? When I started the RazerLift, I actually had no intention of turning it into a company, turning it into a mass-produced good. I thought I was solving a problem for my wife. Just and there's a whole story there. I won't get into that. That's more than 45 minutes there. She had some health issues, but so I thought I was just solving a problem internally. That this is just something I was making for myself, my family. But then with time, it became clear, okay, well, no, actually, there's other people that could use this solution as well as myself and my family. And this is an important question to think about is, what's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish here? Is it just something that's internal for you and your family? Do you want this to be like a hobby business? So, you know, people who might make like really nice wooden tables, for instance, you know, and it's an artwork. Every one of them is a piece of creative artwork. That's going to be more of a hobby business because you have to, you know, invest your creativity in every single product you put out the door. Or is this going to be a mass production type situation where you put all your creativity into the design of the product, but once it's designed, you're just churning out hundreds of them, thousands of them, right? So a question I think is an important one to ask, because it's going to impact a whole lot of what you do, is what's your goal? And the interesting thing I found twice now is, for myself, the goal changed along the way. Twice now I've started off with ideas that are just, well, I think this will be useful for me. That's all I'm trying to do. And then it's turned into, oh, actually other people could use this, and this could be turned into a product. So just think about it and bear in mind if and when your answer changes, because that could impact a lot of other aspects of how you're going about this whole process. Now, the first step I would say in any kind of hardware product that you're coming up with is the whole intellectual property side of things. I've made this mistake a number of times where I get excited about a new idea that I've got. I start designing it. I start, analyzing it, number crunching how this, might fail under load or not fail, and how you design this and sourcing parts and all that, only to find out, oh, actually someone's already done it, right? So that's a colossal waste of your time. You don't want to do that. So try to look into the intellectual property as early as you can. A couple of quick notes. First note, big red there on this slide, PowerPoint, is careful who you talk to. Depending on the jurisdictions that you want to get into, in some cases, in some jurisdictions, if you have talked to basically anybody, you can't get a patent, period. So in some jurisdictions, that's a showstopper right there. In other jurisdictions, Canada and the States, for instance, you do have a little bit more leeway in terms of who you're allowed to talk to. So just be careful. But at first, I would say talk to basically nobody until you really kind of figure this out. Second thing is look into prior art. Now there's if you don't know about Google patents, so Google search engine has a whole section dedicated just to patents and looking up different patents. And I think it's a great tool. So you start there, you start with some keywords. Well, my idea is something like this or something like that. And so you look things up and you find what's called prior art, right? Other patents that have already been filed that are similar. And I mean, look for ones that basically are your idea, because if they are, okay, that puts you in potentially an interesting bind there if someone's already come up with it. There are ways around that, but anyway, not around it, pardon me. You would respect it. You can still go to market, but it just complicates things a bit, I think. You can look up keywords. Also, every patent that's filed will reference other patents and is referenced by other patents that are submitted subsequent to that. So start looking around there, and you get yourself into that web, and you start looking down into different directions in the web. You look up what's their classifications. That's what I was looking for, because all the patents are going to be classified. So find out the classification that's most relevant to what you're doing. Look up some of those under there as well. Make sure you look in the right area. Once you've got a sense that, okay, I don't think that there's anything else out there like this, or there's something similar, but I can maybe work with it, go talk to a patent agent. Now, this is probably some of the first money that you'll be spending, and I would say this is good money to spend, because if you come up with a real winner of an idea and then somebody wants to buy it down the road, but you don't have any IP, they can just take your idea and use it. And there's no sort of net financial gain for you at the end, right? If you get to that stage. So oftentimes when it comes to building the business, depending on the type of business, depending on the product, your IP kind of is your business. So this is one area where I'd say, talk to the patent agent early, get that ball rolling early, and get that figured out. Moving on, think about a technology development roadmap. Now, it's not really possible to have sort of one roadmap for all the different types of products that are out there, because there's so many different varieties and whatnot. So I can't give too many specifics on here, but in just general terms, you need to think through what are the key questions or the key uncertainties that I have with this at this particular point. What is it that I'm trying to solve? Because, if you think about when Elon Musk was going and making electric cars, he probably didn't need to put any real R&D into the tires, because that's kind of, tires are tires and they've been around for a while, and it doesn't really matter if it's electric or gas, but you probably need to put a lot of R&D and consideration to the batteries and the motors and whatnot. So think through with your product, what is it that I'm trying to solve here? What uncertainties do I have? What parts of it could break? What parts need to be designed out of metals? What parts out of plastics? This kind of thing. And you're probably going to want to have a staged development process. In some cases, you can kind of jump to the end product fairly quickly, but in a lot of cases, it's going to be iterative. So you're going to build your first prototype. It's not going to do everything, but it's going to do part of it, right? And then you can develop the next one. So think through that and try to be strategic up front. That way, even for yourself, when you get to a certain point and you're looking like, oh man, but I mean, the finished product's way down the road. It's still out there. You can still look at the roadmap and say, yeah, it's still out there, but look what I've done. I've made some progress here, right? Think through that, right? So in terms of prototypes, I'm actually going to bring out some prototypes here for a new product that I'm working on, bringing to market. it's going along the lines of what I just said about the development roadmap. Ask yourself, what's the purpose of each specific prototype as you're going through this development process? What is it you're trying to solve from the last one that's bringing you closer to the finished product? Because you're probably going to end up with a pile of prototypes, and I'm going to show you some in a minute here, that we're not the finished product. We're never intended to be the finished product, but they got you along that journey, right? As well, focus very much on function. Forget about beauty at first. I mean, it's coming from an engineer, so I don't naturally, think about the aesthetic side of things anyway. But think very specifically about what is it we're trying to accomplish here. What is this supposed to do? And sometimes even the way you've thought that you want to solve this isn't necessarily the way that is necessarily the best way to solve it. Sometimes you might want to redesign the prototype in a way that you weren't expecting so that it will provide the function that you were actually looking for. You also want to think not just in terms of does it work, but how is it going to be used? And I'm going to illustrate that in a little bit as well here. And the other part I would say is once you've got the prototypes partway through or closer to finished product, get feedback, talk to other people. Again, as I said before, you got to be careful about IP issues. So once you've talked to your patent agent and there's clarity around who you can talk to and who you can't and the purpose of the conversations, get out there and talk to people because, you've got some good ideas, but other people also have good ideas and they're going to be more likely to see problems than you are. So I'll actually talk about a product that I'm just working on bringing to market right now. The product stemmed from, again, a challenge I was having internally, which was once, it's going to be a familiar conversation, once COVID hit, my question was, well, I was doing some strength training before that. Now I can't go to the gym. Okay, well, that sucks. So I got to still somehow do some workouts, right? Well, I started looking into resistance bands like these guys, right? And so you got a bunch of different kinds. You got like the loop resistance band, right? And then you've got these other ones that I actually quite like. They have carabiners on the end, right? So you can click them, connect them onto something, right? But both of these have the fundamental challenge of, okay, so what do you anchor it to, right? Do you tie it to your bed? Do you tie it to a doorknob? There are some, there's a door frame, sorry, I'm looking this way, that's where my door is, but there's a door frame attachment that I've seen that some people use. Didn't really impress me. So my thought was, well, what if you could anchor it to the hinge on your door, right? Because the hinge in your door is solid. And even if someone opens the door, it's not going anywhere, right? The hinge is there, it's fixed, it's all that, right? So I started getting this idea about, yeah, it'd be really nice to use the hinge or something attached to the hinge as an anchor point for resistance bands, right? Well, the first prototype I had 3D printed is this guy here. So I don't know how well you can see it, but it's quite flimsy, small 3D printed plastic. And if you look at it, there's this part in the bottom here where a rod is supposed to go through. There was supposed to be a part at the top here too. But the guy who does my 3D printing basically took it off the 3D printer, held it a little bit and accidentally snapped it off. Okay, so my first prototype was absolute garbage and that was just poor design on my part. But that's where you do some learning. Apparently I made everything way too thin. The next prototype is this guy here, much beefier, a lot more solid, lots more material to it in different places. And you'll see, so now this is what goes through the hinge in your door. And I had this other little metal beam here because this is what is supposed to, what the carabiner style connects to. So now I've got an anchor point for the carabiners, right? But I've also got this funny looking saddle here because this is what the resistance bands connect to. All right, so you can put the resistance band on there. It's a nice anchor point for the resistance band, or you can use the carabiner style and click on here. You've got a great anchor point. So I had a couple of these made. I put them up in my room and I started using them. And this was very interesting because this is not just does it work, but how is it used? Because I was kind of curious. You've got an anchor that's on a hinge. Well, the hinge is usually by two walls. So is there going to be enough room for me to do exercise if I'm next to the walls, right? How is my arm going to hit the wall, or how can I was concerned not just about the function, but about the usability, the user experience. And I found out actually it works quite well, even in my den here. I'm not going to turn the camera because it's a bit of a mess, but I've got the arrangement by the door where I'm even more limited in space, but even so, I'm actually able to use it. So I was, encouraged then because now I'm seeing not just does it work, but how do you use it? So I moved on in development, and this is the next iteration. Well, and obviously the hinge does not come with it. The hinge is just on the door, right? But as you can see now, now it's made out of metal. This is steel. It's got this nice rubber padding here to protect the resistance bands that goes through here. And this hole here is still the right size for these carabiners to fit through, right? You can actually fit like 2 or 3 of them on that hole. So now I'm making some significant progress on the design because I've proven the functionality. I've proven the user friendliness of it, the fact that this is something that can be used and applied and is quite workable. And now I'm moving toward, okay, so how would I make hundreds of these? How would I make thousands of these, right? And then as part of the journey on the HingeGym, I also brought in a couple other guys who were smarter than me, wiser than me, told me, okay, Paul, let's slow this whole thing down. Let's do a redesign and let's really get this ready for mass production, and which we've done. And actually you can see the box in the background there. That's going to be heading down to the US, Amazon US pretty quick here, but they're full of these guys. Now this is much, much closer to a real finished product, right? Well, frankly, it is a finished product. This is now aluminum. This is anodized aluminum. It's got a nice red color on it. It's kind of visually attractive. It's got our name right there. It's one piece now. I don't know if you noticed the last one was 3 pieces at the 2 caps on the top there. So now you've got much, much more of a finished product that started with this piece of junk, right? But that's, as you're doing the product development, expect that you're going to have a shelf full of prototypes that didn't work out, because the thought that you can just jump straight to the finished product in certain circumstances for very, very simple products, yeah, sure, it's possible, but in most cases, it's not. Just realizing actually as I'm going through this that I'm just kind of talking a mile a minute here. Were there any questions or anything in the meantime here I can address? Rosemary, has anybody submitted any questions? How does that work actually, I guess, with respect to questions?
Well, anybody can unmute and no one's posted anything in the chat, so we're still good to go.
Okay, well, I do talk a lot, so feel free to interrupt. I will not be offended. So, okay, so that kind of covers.
I think Ron has a question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, it took me a while to get off mute there. And hey, you talked about patent lawyers. How did you figure out a patent lawyer to use? Which one? Or any recommendation on how you select a patent lawyer?
Yeah, so I've talked actually a couple of different patents. So I use one patent agent for RazerLift. I used a different patent agent for the HingeGym. Yeah, they're both good guys. It's not like I didn't like the first guy. He's brilliant. He's a wonderful patent agent. Just various reasons why I kind of wanted to try a couple different guys there. One of them, it's got to just be, does this person seem like somebody you can work with? Is honestly, and I mean, I would say that about everybody. When you get into accounting, you get into legal, oftentimes you can get people with awesome credentials, but it's just not, that's not quite the personality fit or whatever. That's more important than I ever gave it credit for. So I would consider that. And again, actually just quickly, 2 patent agents I worked with, I get along fine with both of them. So that's not an issue there, but I did talk with one guy who was very interesting and I did not work with him. But another thing as well is patent agents will sometimes have different areas of expertise or different areas where they've done a lot of work. They're going to be more familiar with those areas. If that's aligned with what you're doing, that's awesome. If it's not aligned with what you're doing, could be limiting. You might want to find somebody else who's got some familiarity with that's a little bit more along the lines of what you're doing. Then of course, their recommended course of action, getting the IP taken care of. Do you agree with it? Cost, obviously cost is a factor as well. So yeah, those are some of them. Ron, I'm sure you've dealt with some of that too. Do you have any ideas on that?
No, well, yeah, no, I was just going to comment. So different, and it's been a while since I did it, but consumer products versus industrial versus tech, they can be quite different. People specialize. So I think that was the point. And I was just wondering if you'd did a Google search to find it, or is it word of mouth or recommendation to get these people?
So my first one, I didn't have the network that I have now after having developed RazerLift and whatnot. So the first one, I think I went to like Government of Canada, like the Canadian Intellectual Patent Office, and I think they have a list of registered patent agents or something. I think that's how I found the first guy that I worked with. But then as I was developing RazerLift, you get a lot of people who connect with you on LinkedIn, and sometimes they're just there trying to sell you their services or whatever, which isn't always useful. But sometimes it's like, oh, okay, this guy also does IP work, and that's how I connected with the second guy there. I think that's the was through LinkedIn or through a recommendation. Yeah.
Cool. No, that's helpful. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We'll keep going here. Then there's another question as well, obviously with respect to market research. And I guess the other thing that's, some of this is sort of in chronological order, and some of it isn't necessarily. Market research might be something that you actually want to ask. Well, I would argue it's actually something you should be asking yourself all the time throughout the entire process, right? Right from when you first decide this is not just going to be an internal something I make for my wife, whatever. This is something I think I want to sell to other people. You should know who else is out there, who else is solving this problem or a problem similar to this. Is your product better? If it is, why? What exactly is it about your product that's better? You're going to want to ask questions about, like, in terms of the established market, how many people are out there. So with the RazerLift, we looked into how many people buy roof racks for their, for their bikes and their kayaks and such. How many industrial companies are out there that might have ladder racks on the top, right? Because that was the nature of the first product there. But you also, I think it's important to think, I don't think there's enough people who think about what I might call the field of dreams customers, right? The whole, if you build it, they will come customers, because what we found something very interesting with RazerLift, right? Because I don't think I actually described what RazerLift does. I just realized that. Anyway, it's a cargo management system for vehicles. So it takes the cargo from the roof of the vehicle, brings it down to an accessible height where you can load and unload, and then brings it back up. It's all automated and powered. Excuse me. So we'd kind of identified that, it's going to be, sorry, hold on a sec. For bikes and kayaks and canoes and stuff, but also on the commercial side. Well, yeah, excuse me. It always hits when you're in the middle of a presentation, right? So we kind of knew it was there. One of the things that we discovered recently was with COVID, especially, there's a lot of elderly folks who still want to travel, but you couldn't get on an airplane, all that. They've got camper vans, but they would love to bring their kayaks along, but had written it off and said, well, it's impossible, right? There's no solution to do it. Therefore, we plan vacations where we can rent a kayak when we get there or whatever. We're not going to bring it with us. Well, if we had done market research, which was, along the lines of, do you bring your kayak with you when you go on vacation? We would have seen a remarkably low number of people, very little. And you might have looked at that market data and said, well, it's not worth it then. There's hardly anybody who does it. Not realizing they actually wanted to, but there's no product out there that had solved that particular problem. So you might have the kind of product that opens up opportunities for people that they never had before and that they'd written off, but that's not going to show up in the market data, right? So thinking in those terms as well, thinking a little bit outside the box conceptually. And a lot of people are going to talk about this too, the supply chain side of things. When you think about market research, there's two sides, right? You're building your product, you're building it for customers over here, but you're getting the hardware components from over here. Well, that's also, in a sense, part of market research. You got to think of the supply chain side of it. I've heard numerous stories that there are, I don't even know how many, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of vans and trucks and whatnot that Ford have parked out in lots, who knows where, waiting to be delivered, but they don't have the microcontrollers, right? So they're having that supply chain issue where if you can build 99.99% of the vehicle, but you can't get that last 0.01%, that last component that you need, you can't sell the vehicle. You can't make the sale. You can't get it to the customer. So that's when you think of market research, think not just downstream towards your customers and try to understand that. Think upstream too. So RazerLift's a good example again, because we most of the stuff that it's made out of, we can get sourced in a lot, well, most of it honestly in Alberta. And then what we can't get in Alberta, we can get most of it in Canada. But there's a couple of components like, no, you got to go overseas. You don't really have much choice. So then that becomes an interesting challenge, and you need to understand that challenge. You need to think through that. Whereas something like HingeGym, well, that's like, that's 100% just in our backyard here, right? You can get the metal laser cut in one place. You can buy the rubber padding from McMaster-Carr, whatever, you're on your way, right? So think through that stuff as well. This next little tidbit probably applies to, well, actually the last one too, market research. But this one definitely applies, I would say, to any business is, yeah, you got to watch the money. And especially in a hardware, hardware can get really expensive really quickly. So find every means at your disposal to make progress with as little capital as possible. I mean, unless you're not like me and you've got gobs of money in the bank account and you don't know what to do with it, well, it's fine. Then I guess you can. You don't need to be so frivolous, or frugal, pardon me. But for most people, be very careful with it because it will get very expensive very quickly. And especially, like I said, I've got a little bullet point there about the product development. That's why you want it to be focused. You want the product development to be focused. You want it to answer a specific question, answer a specific technical uncertainty, not try to do 3, 4, 8 things all at once in one prototype, except under certain circumstances. Maybe you can do that meaningfully, but you got to be careful to be able to learn from it intelligently and figure out how to get each of the iterations built as cost effectively as possible, because it's going to cost you more money down the road. Government funding is something I would definitely look into. The SHRED program is brilliant. If you don't know about that one, you should definitely learn about it. Well, it's SR&ED, Scientific Research and Experimental Development, so it's called. Alberta Innovates is another great resource. Excuse me. The NRC IRAP program is another one. There's also, like, Red Deer College has an interesting program that I've used. Oh man, I forget the name of it. That's embarrassing. I really should have written that down. Anyway, they've got a great service that they can provide where they can do fee for service, but they can also do some product development, prototyping, design work as well, smaller scale, more focused product, more focused problems and focused work. But they're great to work with as well. So there's lots of good stuff out there. Not all government funding makes sense, and sometimes you end up spending way more time just filling out paperwork than the money you're going to get out of it anyway. So, think through that, but leverage it when you can, when it makes sense. Whoops. This is my last slide here, actually, so I'm ahead of schedule. I guess I still do talk too fast. Last little piece of advice I would have is, for as long as possible, keep the business as simple as possible. To whatever extent you're able to just keep moving it forward on your own, just bootstrapping it, I would strongly recommend you do that. Because the moment you take on shareholders, that changes life. That changes your life for you. And it's good and bad. I want to be clear, it's good and bad. Excuse me again. Because in many cases, if you've got a shareholder on board, it's because they're bringing some other value, whether it's sweat equity or cash-based equity. If it's sweat equity, you got somebody else who's helping you move this forward. That's incredible, right? If it's cash equity, you've got more money now to help move this forward. So there is a massive plus side, but I cannot overemphasize or overstate how much time and energy and money, frankly, you're going to spend on the whole legal side, just the paperwork that's involved. It just became this massive, for me anyway, became this massive part of my life. It just grew into, it became way too big of a monster. So with something like the RazerLift, you needed it. There's no way that I was going to move that company forward just bootstrapping it the whole way. But again, something like HingeGym, well, it's so simple. Yeah, that one, I don't need to have a complicated business. However, and this is why I've got the note there, companies with co-founders do have, that's bad English, or have higher success rate. I'm gonna have to fix that, but they have a higher success rate. So when you're going it alone, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to do it on your own. And frankly, that more difficult does translate into lower likelihood of success. And I think, I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard other people say that there's actually research that shows this, that companies that have co-founders do tend to succeed more. So keep it as simple as you can for as long as you can. But yeah, you know what, depending on the complexity, you're probably going to have to take that step eventually. The other strong piece of advice: paper everything up. With just about everybody. It's some small, quick, informal things, fine. Maybe you don't have to, but just about everything you want to get some paperwork, even just a basic memorandum of understanding, something that says this is what we're trying to do. And it's not even well, I guess maybe it's primarily for legal reasons, but a big part of it too is when you get, if you get 2 or 3 people sitting around, over beers talking about how wonderful it's going to be to do this, that, and the other thing, and then you start in on it the next day, you're going to have different recollections of exactly what you were talking about, and different ideas about this. Well, we didn't talk about this other thing, but it seems obvious to me that we would want to go this way, whereas somebody else, thinks it's obvious we want to go that way. When you're forced to put it on paper, that inherently brings the clarity, right? You're talking about, we're doing this, and we're specifying we're doing this, we're not doing this other thing. So even if this is a longtime friend of yours, if this is, someone who's, at your wedding or whatever, put something on paper, in large part because you want to protect the relationship. So even if everything goes well, hopefully part of the reason it went well is because you were careful to protect the relationship by putting something on paper. So yeah, that's all I've got there. As I said, if you've got other projects you're working on, products or anything like that you're thinking you might want to take to market, if I can add any value, or even just do a coffee, bearing in mind where's that slide? Yeah, watch your money. I've been there. I know what that's about. So if we're going to grab a coffee, I'm not going to charge you. I'll just let you know that. If there's a larger role to help you with something, obviously, then we can talk then. But I will probably be some of the, one of the cheapest sounding boards that you can come up with, or that you can find. So yeah, that's all I've got. So if there's questions, happy to talk about them, or other ideas people have.
Hi, I have a question. My name's Carrie. Hi.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, through the process of both of your items that you brought to market, how did you go about procuring mass production? Like, what was that process like when you've got your prototype, and then how do you figure out who to go to for mass production and what they bring to the table, and where, pros and cons of going here versus there, that kind of thing?
Yeah, good question. And one with a whole bunch of different answers. I'm sure Ron again might want to weigh in on this one too. With the RazerLift, we ended up going with so I ended up bringing a guy onto my team who had extensive experience with mass production, with a former company that he was involved with. He didn't do the mass production himself, but he oversaw it, and he was kind of responsible for setting out a game plan, figuring out who we're going to talk to. So again, leveraging the expertise of people smarter than me is a part of it. We ended up working with a third-party contract manufacturer. So contract manufacturing is definitely one route that can make a ton of sense, depending where you're at and the nature of your product and what have you. With HingeGym, honestly, the first batch, the ones that look like this, I made them. I've got boxes of them right here that are in various states of being completed, because it was the kind of thing where I could get the components done from specific places. I could bring them to my house, and I can put everything together, right? It's simple enough. I can put it all together. So why would I pay somebody else to do that when this is now revenue that I'm waving goodbye to, right? However, when I was talking with like I said, I brought a couple of guys onto the team here who could help me scale this a lot faster. Well, one of them, fortunately, has extensive background in mass production, and he's now doing it in his in his living room instead of me doing it in mine. But it makes more sense because he's in charge of the whole thing. So he's sourcing, where do we get this laser cut from? He's sourcing, where do we get the rubber from? He's sourced all of this stuff. And as I'm talking with him, he's got plans down the road that if we do end up selling, thousands, tens of thousands of these, he's got specific ideas about how to speed up the whole process and thereby reduce his costs and our costs, right? So there's, like I said, a variety of different ways. You can, depending on the product, do it in your living room. You can work with contract manufacturers for bigger projects, bigger products. Yeah, you're probably going to eventually want to get your own facility, hire your own staff, but that's obviously quite a ways down the road. If we're having a conversation today at the early stages, so we have an idea now, what that's that's years down the road. Does that help, or what's is there a specific other aspect to the question that I didn't cover?
No, that's great. Thank you. Just looking for your experience that you've had in that area. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah.
Hey, Paul. This is Ron here. I'll weigh in.
Yeah, please do.
A few thoughts because I've been through this. Well, a couple things. One, keeping it simple is super important. Like everything about that's kind of the entrepreneur's story in general, right? If you start your own business, don't overcomplicate it and don't overspend because cash flow is everything.
Yep.
My experience, though, if you're going to go mass produce overseas or somewhere that you don't have direct control of, then you have to be 100%. Your design has to be 100%. Your manufacturing procedure has to be 100%. Your margins on your product have to be 100%. And then, of course, the farther you get away from North America now, there's a lot of risk around shipping and everything. And surprisingly, so we did some manufacturing in Ontario, which has got a lot of manufacturing, but surprisingly, actually I've done some back in Alberta and Calgary area, and there's some really good resources here. And talking to people around here, so it's really good advice to don't necessarily have too many people with ownership of your company, but it's not bad to actually get a bit of an advisory or network group. So once you have your patent or anything, then literally go talk to people, because once you get in touch with people who are doing manufacturing around here, even yourself, there's different plastic injection mold places and all that who do remarkably good work right around Calgary. And until you actually have sent, until you sold hundreds or thousands of your products, you don't even know if you have the final design, right? So the more you can manage it locally, the better until you're pretty solid. And then once you know you have your product design and like there's nothing that's going to change and you're satisfied, then you can almost do RFPs and go out to Mexico or to other places. But I wouldn't discount being able to do that actually around Calgary, a lot of that mass production.
Yeah, I'd just leverage off that comment as well, that if you do want to go overseas, talk to people who've done it and who have those kinds of connections, not just, oh yeah, I did it years ago, but who are actively, still involved there. It's because they can be your boots on the ground, right? They can be the eyes and ears over there. I do know of a company in Edmonton. I haven't used them because it didn't work out for RazerLift and whatnot. But that's something that they do and they offer, is they've got those connections to China, so they can, and they have a person there, right? So now you're essentially working with a North American company, an Edmonton-based company, and but it's you're getting the sort of the price advantage of overseas. But yeah, as Ron said, and I would second that too, there are so many resources in Calgary specifically, in Alberta generally, and in Canada for sure, nation, coast to coast there. I've been surprised, like when I first started with RazerLift, I really in hindsight feel like I was flying blind. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea who was who in the zoo or where to find these or that resources. And even when I would do searches for whatever, plastic injection molding or machine shops or whatever, you'd get a couple of hits, not as many as I was expecting. But I've found sometimes the really good quality folks, the ones who can get you just absolutely great product, great quality, good price, they don't necessarily have an awesome web presence, which is challenging, because then you got to already be moving in those circles, which is a challenge. And if you're not already moving in those circles, well, how do you get moving in those circles, right? So yeah, there's far more resources, I would say, like Ron said, far more resources than even I was aware of, and I'm still learning about new ones regularly.
We do have a comment from Mark in the chat. He says,
Sure.
Thank you for the presentation, Paul. Really appreciated your insight. What is your experience with licensing, and what are some fundamental steps to take before approaching companies to have them license your IP?
Great question. And I'm going to preface it by saying so far I have not gone that route. So I don't have direct experience. So just anything I'm saying after this point, just bear in mind that little disclaimer. But I have actually, I've been getting to know another gentleman who I've got a lot of respect for, and he's been very successful with doing lots of licensing agreements. So if there's a conversation that needs to be had there to gain more detail, I could potentially help facilitate an introduction there. From what I know and conversations I've had, I would say, again, going back to the IP, before you would talk to any company anywhere about licensing anything you've got, you got to have your IP in order. You got to have that protection. So I mean, that would be step number one, I would say. From my understanding, I think as well, you want to have your prototypes as far along as you can possibly get them. You want to show them something that's more than just scratches on a napkin. Actually, I'm going to tell a really, we got time here. We're at 45 minutes right now. Really embarrassing story. The very first time that I spoke with anybody like in the industry about the RazerLift, I had literally, actually maybe I shouldn't tell this because it's being recorded, so this is going to exist out there forever. I built a Lego model of the whole thing that was, yay big, right? And I went to this company and I was talking to, it's a smaller company, so you could get it, walk in the front door, talk to the CEO. And yeah, I was pitching this idea I had with a tiny little Lego model that you turn the little knob thing and it made it go up and down, right? I mean, ridiculous. In hindsight, that was, I mean, I'd never do that again, right? That was embarrassing, the wrong way to do it. And I'm sure that they all got a really, really good chuckle out of it after I walked out the door, right? You want to have your technology as far along as you can. You got to strike a balance here, right? Because if you can bring it all the way to the point where it's manufacturing ready, why would you license it? You're already there. Just get your manufacturer in place and have at it, right? But if it's too early, if it's a Lego model, right? Well, then, you're not far enough. So you want to go somewhere in the middle there where they get it and your technology is proven it does what it says it's going to do. Yeah, I want to be careful. I don't want to say much beyond that just because I don't have direct experience. But like I said, if that's the conversation Mark wants to follow up, I do know a guy who's done this extensively, and I suspect, I can't speak on his behalf, but I suspect he'd be willing to grab a coffee. I hope that's helpful.
He says, awesome, thank you.
Okay, good. Glad I could help. Oh, there's the chat.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Or Paul, is there anything else you'd like to bring up?
Oh, this is all I planned. I forgot how fast I talk when I'm presenting, so I should have anticipated that a little bit more. No, I don't have anything else right now. If people have other questions, they can get in touch with you and to get through to me that way. I do have a LinkedIn account, so feel free to touch base with me there as well. If
Paul's LinkedIn will be in the description for the video as well.
Ah, perfect. Yeah. And I do tend to accept most network invitations. So, as long as you don't seem like you're going to spam me or try to sell me some service I really, really don't need, then yeah, let's chat. And if I can help anyone, that'd be great.
All right. Well, then I will say thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Yeah. Thank you guys. And see you. We'll chat later.
Yep. All right. And everybody, hope you have a great day.